Chapter 2242. The two silhouettes leaped onto the roof and started fighting. Fengjiu, who was sitting below, picked up the torn corner of her dress and looked at it. She saw that her dress had been ruined just like that, especially when the corner of her dress had fallen into the hands of Yixiran, who seemed to be having a fit. She played with the missing corner of her dress, narrowed her eyes, and looked towards the roof. Duan Yi was at the peak of the fairy realm, but Yixiran, who was dressed in black, was actually able to fight him without being at a disadvantage. Haha, how interesting. A dark light flashed through her eyes, and the corners of her mouth held a faint smile as she stared at the two people on the roof. She held a wine glass in one hand and tapped the table with the other. The others did not speak anymore, but stared at the two people on the roof, somewhat surprised by the black-robed man's strength. They knew that Duan Yi was a genius of the Cloud Jade Immortal sect, but who was this black-robed man? How could he fight with him without being at a disadvantage? Ghost Doctor, why don't I take you to change your clothes first? Lu Xian came to her side and asked. After all, she was a woman, and it was not very nice to have a corner of her dress torn off. No need, Fengjiu said indifferently. I'll go back and change later. Seeing this, Lu Xian returned to her father's side and sat down. She looked towards the roof and saw that Uncle Duan was fighting with that person, but it seemed that he could not hurt that person. She knew that that person's strength should be higher than his. After fighting for a while, Duan Yi also knew that this person's strength was higher than his. He was at the peak of the fairy realm, so this person should be at the celestial sage realm? What a celestial sage who could hide! He did not even reveal the slightest bit of celestial sage aura. However, when he saw that this person had torn the corner of Fengjiu's clothes, but he could not do anything to him, he could not help but feel angry, and his attacks became fiercer. Suddenly his body technique changed, and so did the wind from his palm. Spiritual energy surged all over his body, and he suddenly struck out with his palm. The palm formed by the aura of spiritual energy grew from small to large, and from 1 to 2. The palms overlapped and attacked that person with a force that could not be heard. Bang! Bang bang bang! The first palm strike was dodged, but the subsequent palm strikes landed on Yixiran's body. Yixiran's leisurely expression changed slightly as he was sent flying. Pooh! He spat out a mouthful of blood, and his body fell from the roof. He crashed into another wall and bounced to the ground with a loud bang. Hiss! He gasped and sat up from the ground. He raised his hand to wipe off the blood at the corner of his mouth. And then he raised his eyes to look at Duan Yi, who flashed down from the roof. His eyes flashed slightly, and he was extremely shocked in his heart. This man was only at the peak of the fairy realm, but his fighting strength was astonishing. He had never thought that he would be defeated by this man at the peak of the fairy realm, with his strength as a celestial sage. When he was defeated by Fengjiu, he was convinced. However, after being defeated by this baby-faced man, his heart was in turmoil, and he had the urge to fight again. Since when did he, the Lord of the Temple of the Dark Night, become someone who could be defeated by anyone? Or could it be that everyone around Fengjiu was a freak? Were they all abnormal geniuses? Duan Yi flashed down from above and arrived in front of Yixiran. His voice was cold as he said, "You dare to touch her? If you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish." Chapter 2243. That's enough. She stood up and slowly walked forward, stopping in front of Yixiran. Her clear gaze landed on his outstanding face. Why do I feel like I've seen you somewhere before? Recognize him? Impossible. Not to mention that he wore a mask when they fought before, so she couldn't see his face. Even when he fought with Duan Yi just now, he didn't use any of his previous moves. Otherwise, how could he have lost so easily to this brat? If she had recognized him, she would have attacked long ago. Why would she need to ask him? Thus, he took out the piece of cloth torn from Fengjiu's body and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. Then, he looked at her, and the corners of his mouth twitched, revealing a smile. Didn't we meet in the backyard at noon? Have you forgotten so quickly? He rubbed his chest and glanced at Duan Yi. This brat was really heavy-handed. It was also because he was too careless that he was defeated. If it happened again, he would definitely beat him down. Fengjiu's eyes flickered. She stared at him for a long time without saying anything. After a long while, she turned and walked towards City Lord Lu. City Lord, please excuse me for tonight's banquet. She nodded slightly and turned to leave. When Duanyi saw this, he stared at the blood-stained corner of his shirt and frowned. He warned, "Stay away from her in the future." With that, he excused himself from City Lord Lu and chased after Fengjiu. The other cultivators were dumbfounded when they saw this scene. They stared blankly and couldn't figure out what was going on. That woman was just a doctor. Why did it seem like Duanyi, immortal monarch, obeyed her? The corner of her shirt was torn, but before she could say anything, Duanyi jumped out to protect her. What was the relationship between the two of them? And that cultivator surnamed Yi, he was a celestial sage expert. How could he lose to Duanyi, who was at the peak of the fairy realm? One had to know that the difference in strength between the two realms was huge. Many cultivators couldn't cross this threshold in their entire lives. It was obvious how great the difference in strength was. Yet, Duanyi had defeated that guy? Who is this Fengjiu? Is she really just an ordinary doctor? Didn't City Lord Lu say he's called the Ghost Doctor? Perhaps he really is a skilled doctor. That's true. Otherwise, why would fellow immortal Duan be so protective of her? Did you hurt someone out of anger for her? Speaking of which, fellow immortal Duan is truly worthy of being a genius of the Cloud Jade Immortal Sect. He's actually able to deal with someone stronger than him. His future is truly limitless. Not bad, not bad. Everyone was discussing, although the topic was about Fengjiu. But as they talked, they started to talk about Fengjiu. However, some cultivators were more cautious and no longer treated Fengjiu as an ordinary person. To be able to make City Lord Lu treat him differently, to be able to make Duanyi step forward to protect him, and to be able to make that celestial sage cultivator surnamed Yi want to get close to him. It was clear that this person definitely had some background. When City Lord Lu saw the two of them leave, he gestured for Ruan Xian and Ruan Ru to follow them. Then, he walked towards Yi Shiran, who stood up from the corner of the wall, and asked, "Immortal Monarch Yi, are you all right?" A dignified celestial sage expert had been defeated by someone at the peak of the fairy realm in front of so many people. Even he didn't know how to comfort him. Chapter 2244. Fengjiu returned to the courtyard. Duanyi, who followed behind her, glanced at her torn clothes and said, "Go change your clothes first. We'll talk later." Hearing this, she looked back at him and sat down at the stone table in the courtyard. She smiled and said, "Talk about what? Say it." She played with the torn corner of her clothes and smiled. "Who is that person? How did you meet him?" He also sat down and looked at her. She had clearly been with him for the past 2 days, yet she could still provoke such a person. Fengjiu rested her chin on one hand and said, "Like he said before, we met at the rockery at noon. I think he's called Yi Shiran. This person is somewhat unfathomable. You'd better be careful." Duanyi frowned and reminded her. He'd exchanged blows with Yi Shiran before, so he naturally knew that Yi Shiran wasn't simple. The reason Yi Shiran was able to defeat Yi Shiran was partly because Yi Shiran had underestimated Yi Shiran. If Yi Shiran had really used his full strength, then it was impossible for a dignified celestial sage to really lose to him. "And I just feel that this person is somewhat familiar, but I don't remember when I've met him," she said thoughtfully. "Ah, help. Ha 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 ha." Suddenly, a cry of surprise rang out, followed by a wild laughter. The laughter carried with it a powerful pressure, and circles of spiritual energy, aura visible to the naked eye, also spread out in the night. Not good. Fengjiu stood up in an instant and rushed out with a step. Duanyi also quickly returned to his senses and hurriedly ran in the direction of the voice. However, after the two of them rushed out for a while, they saw a black figure in the middle of the night grabbing Lu Xian in one hand and Ruan Ru in the other like an eagle grabbing a chick. Wild laughter came out of his mouth. "Ha ha 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 ha. You want to deal with me with just the two of you? You're overestimating yourselves. Surnamed Lu, this demon will take your daughter away first. Her blood must be very fresh and sweet." As he spoke, he stuck out his tongue and licked it. His evil and sinister face was full of arrogance. It really is a devil cultivator. Catch him. Don't let him escape. A group of cultivators rushed over from the front. When City Lord Lu saw that his daughter and Ruanru had been captured by the devil cultivator, his heart could not help but sink. He shouted sternly, "Let them go!" He raised his chi and leaped into the air. Stepping on the wind, he rushed towards the devil cultivator with a sword in his hand. "Father!" Lu Xian's face was pale. Her acupoints seemed to have been sealed, and she could not move or struggle. Ruanru, who was caught in the other hand, also had a pale face. Although she was scared, she did not cry for help. She just tried to calm herself down and find a chance to survive. If they were captured by this devil cultivator, the two of them would probably end up with their chi and blood sucked dry. Rather than waiting for someone to save them, they might as well think of a way to save themselves. Because the two of them had originally come to the backyard to look for Fengjiu, they were close to Fengjiu and Duanyi. At this moment, Fengjiu glanced at the devil cultivator who wasn't very far away from her, as well as Lu Xian and Ruanru, and her heart trembled slightly. She immediately moved her hand, and silver needles shot out with a swish. At the same time, she tapped the tip of her foot and flashed up. Chapter 2245. A ribbon wrapped around the falling Lu Xian's foot with a whoosh and pulled her down. When the devil cultivator reached out to grab her, she threw her down. Even the devil cultivator couldn't react to the unexpected scene. "Catch!" Fengjiu shouted. She pulled the hand wrapped around the red armillary sash and threw Lu Xian in the direction of Duanyi. After throwing her down, she threw the red armillary sash in her hand again, without even looking at it, attacking the devil cultivator. Duanyi followed closely behind her. When he saw her raise her chi and instantly pull out the red armillary sash to wrap around Lu Xian, he was already prepared to catch her. At this time, after catching her, he reached out to unseal her acupoints. "Martial Uncle Duan, save Ruanru." Lu Xian's face was deathly pale. She only felt that she had walked through the gate of death. As long as she thought of that person sticking out his tongue and licking her neck, she couldn't help but shiver, and her legs felt a little weak. "Don't worry," Duanyi said. Seeing that City Lord Lu had already rushed here, he raised his chi and flew into the air. At this time, the cultivators had already surrounded the devil cultivator to prevent him from escaping. They couldn't help but be slightly surprised when they saw Fengjiu in red holding a ribbon in her hand and fighting with the devil cultivator. The aura surging on her body was the aura of profound strength. It turned out that she was a profound cultivator. Moreover, she was a profound martial god. With such strength, even a profound cultivator was not weak. Duanyi joined the battle with his sword. When the other cultivators saw this, they also surrounded the devil cultivator. However, when the devil cultivator was attacked, he used Ruanru, who was caught by him, to block them, making them feel as if their hands and feet were tied and unable to display their strength. Come on if you don't want her to die. Ha 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 ha. A bunch of trash want to catch me? You're dreaming." The devil cultivator stared at the crowd and said in an arrogant and provocative voice. Suddenly his aura sank. He waved his hand and shouted. A powerful pressure visible to the naked eye suddenly spread out. The powerful pressure that came from the sky carried a destructive aura. It was the pressure of an immortal venerable. In an instant, it sent everyone around flying, including Fengjiu. Yes, Fengjiu let out a muffled groan as she was sent flying by the powerful airflow. The profound energy in her body was slightly disrupted, and her blood energy also surged towards her throat, but she forcefully suppressed it. The figure that staggered backwards was unable to stop under the pressure, and Duanyi was also sent flying a few meters away. However, just as she was about to fall to the ground, a black figure rushed over and reached out to support her. "Are you all right?" Ishiran supported her. Seeing that her breathing was unstable, he said, "He's a venerable immortal expert. You're not his match. Withdraw first." Although he didn't know what was going on with her, why was there only the aura of dark force in her body? However, with her current strength, she was no match for an immortal venerable expert, especially one of the 10 devils, Shueluo. After Fengjiu steadied herself, she pulled away from him. She raised her eyes and stared at the arrogant devil cultivator with furrowed brows. A look of contemplation flashed across her eyes. Ah, he's actually an immortal venerable expert. Chapter 2246. Listening to the words of those cultivators, Fengjiu's eyes moved slightly. Wanru was still in the hands of that devil cultivator. How could she save her? Father, what should we do? Wanru is still in the hands of that devil cultivator. Lu Xian said worriedly, but there was no way to save her. With her strength, she felt that it was a problem to get close. Don't worry, there will be a chance to save her. City Lord Lu comforted, thinking of a way in his heart. Lu Xian looked at the fearless devil cultivator in the air and Wanru, who had not spoken or struggled. She knew in her heart that if the ghost doctor hadn't taken the opportunity to save her, she would still be in the hands of this devil cultivator at this time. However, she was saved, but Wanru was not out of danger yet. At this time, Wanru, who was caught by the devil cultivator, looked at the crowd below, and her whole person became calmer and calmer. She knew that the ghost doctor saved Shi Yan before, because Shi Yan was closer to her, and the chance of saving her was greater. She was caught by the devil cultivator on the other side, so she was far away from him. Anyone would save her first. This absolutely had nothing to do with Shi Yan being the daughter of the city lord. She also knew that in the current situation, she could only find a chance to save herself. Otherwise, the people below would be worried about her safety and would not be able to take action. In addition, this devil cultivator was very strong. If it dragged on, it would really be difficult for her to survive. So her heart moved slightly. Her eyes swept over the crowd, fell on the ghost doctor, and met her eyes. Inexplicably, she felt that if she could survive from this devil cultivator, she must have her help. However, she couldn't remind her with words, only with her eyes. Fengjiu was thinking of a way. When she looked up at Wanru, she saw her eyes fall on her with expectation. Seeing this, her heart moved slightly. Wanru was even calmer than Lu Xian. Could it be that she had some ideas? Just as she was thinking, she saw something poke out of her lapel and climb up quietly. It came to the hand of the devil cultivator that was holding Wanru's lapel, and suddenly opened its mouth and bit down fiercely on that hand. Shueluo stared at the crowd below and laughed. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain in his hand. He sucked in a breath of air and instinctively flung the person in his hand away. She lost her balance and fell to the ground. The strength of the immortal venerable expert caused her to fall at an extremely fast speed. In addition, her acupoints were sealed. If no one caught her, she would be seriously injured, even if she didn't die from the fall. At this moment, Fengjiu reacted faster than anyone else. She had been paying attention all along, and when the devil cultivator pulled Wanru out, she also shot out several silver needles. At the same time, she leaped out with the tip of her toes and wrapped the red armillary sash around Wanru's waist, pulling her to her side. At the same time, she withdrew her venerable immortal's strength and safely brought her to the ground. Almost at the same time, City Lord Lu and Duan Yi raised their chi at the same time. When the other cultivators saw this, they also surrounded the devil cultivator. In an instant, saber lights and sword shadows shot out, and a powerful airflow and pressure spread out in the air. Wanru, how are you? Lu Xian hurriedly came to her side. At this time, Fengjiu unsealed Wanru's acupoints and asked, "Are you okay?" Chapter 2247. After taking a deep breath, she shook her head. Her lips trembled slightly as she said to Fengjiu, "I am fine. Thank you, Ghost Doctor, for saving me." With that, she tightly held Lu Xian's hand next to her, trying to suppress the fear in her body. Seeing her trembling like this, Fengjiu, in order to distract her, asked, "What was that thing just now? Was it your spiritual pet?" "It's Yuan, my spiritual pet." Speaking of this, Wanru stretched out her hand, and a white spirit pet the size of a fist crawled into her palm. The little thing was round and small. Its body was the size of a fist, and it looked like a spirit mouse. When it opened its mouth, it revealed its sharp teeth, as though it was telling Fengjiu that it had used these teeth to bite the fiendish cultivator and save its master. "Very good. Fengjie smiled and glanced at the little spiritual pet. Hearing this, Wanru also revealed a smile and responded. Her tense mood also loosened up. At this time Xue Luo, who was besieged by the crowd, was cut by City Lord Lu and Duan Yi. Blood seeped out, and the smell of blood made him even crazier and fiercer. Several cultivators were killed by him in the siege, and their corpses were thrown down from a high place, as if they were garbage. He seemed to be in a killing frenzy. After killing those cultivators, he looked up to the sky and laughed again. Ha 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 ha. Since you forced me to kill, I'll fulfill your wish. His voice suddenly stopped, and his vicious and bloodthirsty eyes swept over the cultivators. Finally, they swept across the crowd and fell on Fengjie, who was dressed in red. Not a single one of you can walk out of here alive. He waved his hands and slowly clenched them into fists. He stared at them and said in a bloodthirsty voice, "After killing you, I'll slaughter the city lord's mansion, and then the whole city. I want you to die here one by one." Seeing how powerful Xue Luo was, being able to kill a cultivator with a wave of his hand, the others couldn't help but hesitate. If they went forward and were killed, wouldn't that mean, thinking of this, a few cultivators couldn't help but retreat. After retreating about 10 meters, they apologized to City Lord Lu. "City Lord Lu, Xue Luo is too strong. We are really no match for him. I'm sorry." As they spoke, they cupped their fists apologetically to City Governor Lu, and turned around to leave. However, just as they turned around, Xue Luo's figure flashed and instantly appeared behind them like a ghost. He clenched his fists and suddenly punched out with powerful pressure and airflow. "I will send you on your way." As soon as his voice fell, 2 fists instantly struck out. The fists directly penetrated the flesh of the 2 men from the back. A mournful scream was heard, and 2 loud bangs were heard. The fists struck out, and a bloody hole appeared in the bodies of the 2 men. Flesh and blood splattered out, dyeing the ground red and spraying on the opposite wall. It was a ghastly sight. Seeing this scene, Lu Xian and Ruanru turned pale and almost vomited. They supported each other and looked away, resisting the urge to scream out loud. Fengjie looked at the scene with a dignified expression. He thought to himself, "The strength of a celestial venerable is really extraordinary. He can actually punch 2 bloody holes in the bodies of the 2 cultivators. With such strength, who here can be his opponent?" Chapter 2248. If he joined forces with City Lord Lu and Duan Yi, they should have a chance to win. However, how could she make him attack? She couldn't help but frown. Although her profound strength had reached the Black Tortoise God realm, it was still impossible for her to deal with an immortal venerable. However, if she had the strength of a celestial sage and the emerald-edged sword, her chances of winning would be much higher. Right now, her spirit energy was sealed, and the emerald-edged sword wasn't in her hands. She really didn't know how to deal with this situation. At this moment, Xue Luo, who had just killed 2 cultivators, suddenly turned his head. His gaze swept across the crowd and landed on the beautiful red-clothed Fengjie. A faint light flashed across his eyes. In the next moment, his figure flashed and rushed towards Fengjie at an extremely fast speed. "Watch out!" Duan Yi shouted and tried to stop him, but he was repelled by a stream of air from Xue Luo's hand. His body involuntarily retreated. When Yi Shiran saw this, he immediately moved forward and attacked Xue Luo the moment he reached out to grab Fengjie. Everyone only saw a cold light flash before their eyes. A biting cold sword chi shot towards Xue Luo. The sharp air current reflected a chilling sword chi, forcing Xue Luo to retreat several meters. He narrowed his eyes filled with hostility and stared at the man standing in front of the red-clothed woman. His gloomy voice was laced with bloodthirsty killing intent. "Who are you?" Yi Shiran blocked with his sword and stared sharply at Xue Luo. "I don't care who you grab, but you can't touch her." Hearing this, Fengjie's eyes flickered. She stared at Yi Shiran for a moment before shifting her gaze to Xue Luo, an intermediate immortal venerable realm devil cultivator, who increased his cultivation through blood and qi. His methods were sinister, and he had rich combat experience. It would be very difficult for Yi Shiran to defeat him alone. Each of the 10 devils under the devil venerable had extraordinary cultivation. It was no wonder this devil cultivator dared to run amok on this continent, even with the suppression of the 4 great sections. While she was deep in thought, City Lord Lu and Duan Yi once again attacked with their swords. Ishiran's sword-wielding hand also turned. A sword light flashed and sword flowers flew out. The 4 figures fought in midair. The other cultivators didn't dare to step forward, but no one left. They guarded the surroundings below. In order to avoid being affected by the powerful pressure, they even retreated a distance away. Xue Luo's hand turned into a claw and suddenly clawed out, tearing apart City Lord Lu's robe. Even the flesh on his shoulder was clawed out, leaving behind a few shocking bloodstains. Father! Lu Xian's heart tightened. She covered her mouth with both hands and exclaimed, "Yes!" City Lord Lu let out a muffled groan. With one hand covering the wound on his shoulder, he staggered and fell from the air. The blood oozing out of the wound on his shoulder could not be stopped. After a while his hand was dyed red. Ha 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 ha. The City Lord of Luhe City is nothing more than this. Xue Luo raised his head and laughed. His laughter abruptly stopped as he stared at Fengjiu again. It seemed that he really had his eyes on her. However, he also knew that if he wanted to capture her, he would have to get rid of these 2 first. Therefore, his bloodthirsty gaze turned and landed on Duan Yi. Chapter 2249. A powerful airflow that was visible to the naked eye rotated in Xue Luo's hands like a vortex. The vortex grew bigger and bigger, causing the surrounding aura to become heavier and heavier. The spiritual energy in the surroundings was sucked into the vortex. Even some of the cultivators in the courtyard below could feel the strangeness of the vortex. No, his vortex seems to be, is. When a middle-aged cultivator saw the vortex break away from Xue Luo's hands and form a vortex in front of him, and exuding a powerful suction force, his expression changed and he stuttered. He couldn't finish his sentence and retreated more than 10 meters in an instant, for fear of being sucked into the vortex. Xue Luo. Legend has it that Xue Luo, one of the 10 devils, has the ability to open the door of darkness. This is the door of darkness. Quick! Run! Don't be sucked in, or you won't be able to come back. An old cultivator exclaimed and shouted at Duan Yi. This was because Duan Yi was the closest to the Xue Luo, and from the looks of it, the Xue Luo wanted to send Duan Yi into the dark door. Run! Run! That's the door of darkness. Once you're teleported in, you won't be able to come out again. Run! Fellow immortal Duan! Run! However, just as all the cultivators exclaimed, Duan Yi was suppressed by Xue Luo's immortal venerable pressure. It was as if Mount Tai was pressing down on him, making him unable to straighten his back, mobilize the spiritual energy in his body, and escape. His body was being pulled forward step by the suction force of the vortex. Martial Uncle Duan! Martial Uncle Duan! Lu Xian and Ruan Ru exclaimed when they saw that Duan Yi was about to be sucked into the vortex. However, they couldn't save him. At this moment Fengjiu, who was not far from them, suddenly jumped up and wrapped the red armillary sash around Duan Yi's feet, trying to pull him down. Do you think it's possible to save him? You're really indulging in fantasy. Xue Luo's gloomy voice sounded. He turned his hands, and the suction force became stronger. Even though she was pulling Duan Yi, her body couldn't help but be pulled up. Seeing that the situation was getting more and more dangerous, and that Fengjiu would be sucked into the door of darkness if he wasn't careful, Ishiran immediately attacked. He injected spirit force into his sword and attacked Xue Luo with killing intent. Ha 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 ha. Go in. Go in. It's not easy for me to open the door of darkness. This time, it's your lucky day. As soon as Xue Luo finished speaking, Duan Yi was sucked into the whirlpool. His upper body was already inside, but his lower body didn't fall in because of Fengjiu's red armillary sash. Seeing that Duan Yi was in danger, Fengjiu promptly pulled back the red armillary sash in her hands. She pulled the red armillary sash closer to Duan Yi and pulled him back. With a slap, she sent him 10 meters away. At this moment, Ishiran attacked Xue Luo from behind, causing him to be caught off guard by the sword. This caused the blood qi around him to surge and fill the air with killing intent. He roared and struck Ishiran with 100% of his strength. At the same time, because the blood chi in his body dissipated, the door of darkness gradually closed. Chapter 2250. As soon as that strand of vital blood was poured in, a powerful suction force suddenly surged from the door of darkness that was gradually closing, and it was like a whirlwind that sucked in Fengjiu, who was about to flee at a speed that was too fast for her ears to react. Fengjiu, Duan Ye's expression changed drastically. He wanted to rush forward, but he was sent 10 meters away. It was impossible for him to save her. Fengjiu, Ishiran's expression changed when he saw this. He was hit by Xue Luo's palm. Coupled with the scene, he was so anxious that he spurted out a mouthful of blood and fell from the sky. The door of darkness in the sky closed instantly, as though it had never appeared, and disappeared without a trace. Fengjiu, who was dressed in red, also disappeared. What a pity. I originally wanted to send all of you in. Since you missed the opportunity, I'll have to kill all of you one by one. A sinister voice filled with killing intent spread in the night. Xue Luo's figure flashed and charged towards the cultivators below. However, at that moment in the night sky, there were several white silhouettes on flying swords flying over. They were the elders of the magnificent immortal sect, and they had come for Fengjiu. Not long ago, they had received news from the magnificent immortal sect that the ghost doctor Fengjiu was Fengxing. Because of this, they had sent 1 or 2 immortal venerables to the Heavenly Pill Pavilion in 100 River City to have a talk with ghost Dr. Fengjiu. When they passed by this area, they saw the unusual movement in the sky from afar. They also sensed the powerful pressure and aura of a demon cultivator. That was why they had rushed over. When they arrived at Luhe City, they saw the immortal venerable demon cultivator slaughtering the cultivators in all directions. The cultivators below were either dead or injured. Among them, there was someone they were familiar with. Duan Yi, one of the immortal venerables from the Cloud Jade immortal sect, recognized Duan Yi. His heart sank when he saw Duan Yi fighting the demon cultivator with bloodshot eyes and wounds all over his body. He immediately attacked the demon cultivator. It's Xue Luo. An immortal venerable recognized the devil cultivator and said coldly, I've fought him before. He's one of the 10 great devil cultivators under the demon lord, Xue Luo. This person's methods are ruthless, and his battle prowess is astonishing. When the other immortal monarchs saw the situation and heard the immortal monarch's words, they immediately attacked the demonic cultivator. Kill him. Don't let him escape. Several immortal venerables shouted coldly. Several rays of cold light streaked across the sky. With a wave of their hands, they formed a sword formation in midair and attacked Xue Luo. When Yi Shiran, who had joined forces with Duan Yi and City Lord Lu, saw that the 4 great immortal sects' immortal venerables had arrived, he secretly heaved a sigh of relief and fell to the ground. At this moment, because he was desperately defending, his body was covered in wounds of various sizes. Looking around, besides Lu Xian and Ruan Ru, who were protected by the 3 of them, the other cultivators had been killed by Xue Luo. The ground was covered in corpses and splashed with blood. It was a ghastly sight. Duan Yi, why are you here? Didn't you follow the people from the sect to gain experience? Chapter 2251. At this moment, Duan Yi was clenching his sword tightly. His lips were tightly pursed. His baby face was covered with blood, and his eyes were red as he stared at Xue Luo, who was besieged by several immortal venerables. Don't kill him. I want him alive. Duan Yi's cold voice sounded, which stunned the celestial primes. Duan Yi, you're seriously injured. Let's sit down first. The celestial primes of the Cloud Jade immortal sect wanted to help him to sit down, but he grabbed his hand tightly. Martial uncle. Duan Yi looked at him and grabbed his hand tightly. His eyes were red, and his voice was choked with sobs. Seeing Duan Yi's expression, the celestial primes of the Cloud Jade immortal sect couldn't help but ask, What's wrong? Tell martial uncle. He knew Duan Yi, who was his senior brother's favorite disciple. However, his eyes were red, and his voice was choked with sobs. What the hell happened? He opened the door of darkness and made Fengjiu disappear. Duan Yi's blood was boiling. At this moment he was afraid, worried, and blamed himself. He was afraid that Fengjie would die because of this. He was worried that she would never come back. He blamed himself even more. If she hadn't tried to save him, she wouldn't have been sucked into the vortex. When the celestial primes heard this, his eyebrows twitched. He looked at Duan Yi and said cautiously, "Fengjie? It can't be that ghost Dr. Fengjie, right?" "It's her." Duan Yi's words made the celestial prime stiffen. He couldn't help but raise his voice. "What? It's really her? She was sucked into the door of darkness? It's over, it's over." His expression changed drastically, and he was so anxious that he was walking in circles. They came for ghost Dr. Fengjie. They wanted to go to the Heavenly Elixir Dispensary in the 100 River City to find her. Who knew that they would encounter this halfway? Xueluo's door of darkness. How could this be? However, just as his mind was in a mess, he heard a blood-curdling scream. When he looked up, he saw the immortal venerables killing Xueluo. His heart trembled as he murmured, "It's really over this time. Something big has happened." Duan Yi also saw the scene of Xueluo being killed, and his lips moved slightly, but he couldn't say a word. The speed of the several immortal venerables was too fast. It only took them a few moves to kill Xueluo, so fast that he didn't even have time to react. Right now, he was only concerned about where Fengjie would be sent after being sucked into the door of darkness. His only concern was whether he would live or die after entering that place. Could she come back alive? Or perhaps could they go and find her? These demons are getting more and more presumptuous. You actually dare to come out and cause trouble? Do you really think that our 4 great immortal sects are just decorations? An immortal venerable said. With their combined strength, killing Xueluo was as easy as blowing off dust. Another immortal venerable sighed and shook his head while looking at the corpses on the ground. "It's a pity that we came too late and allowed Xueluo to kill so many cultivators. If we had arrived 30 minutes earlier, perhaps there wouldn't be so many casualties." Another immortal venerable sighed and shook his head while looking at the corpses. Chapter 2252. They couldn't help but feel puzzled. What's wrong with this celestial prime? Why does he look a little strange? The few of them looked at each other before descending from the sky and walking towards them. "Thank you for saving us, celestial primes." City Lord Lu hurriedly stepped forward and bowed to the celestial primes to express his gratitude. The celestial primes waved their hands and said, "It's okay. We just happened to pass by. It's just that we were one step too late and let Xueluo kill so many people." City Lord Lu glanced at the corpses on the ground and said sadly, "Don't worry, celestial primes. I will definitely give them a proper burial." He didn't expect that the demonic cultivator would be Xueluo. He also didn't expect that tonight would be so tragic. Not only did so many cultivators die, but they also almost lost their lives here. Even the ghost doctor was sucked into the vortex because of this. He didn't know if she was still alive or not. The celestial primes nodded when they heard City Lord Lu's words. They walked towards the celestial primes of the Cloud Jade Immortal sect and glanced at Duan Yi. Then they asked, "Old friend, what's wrong? Why do you look a little strange?" "It's over, it's over. It's really over this time. We're in big trouble." The celestial primes shook his head. The current situation was unexpected. "What's over? Tell us in detail." One of the celestial primes asked. "Duan Yi, didn't you go with your uncle master and the others to gain experience? Why are you here?" Another celestial primes of the Cloud Jade Immortal sect asked, wondering why Duan Yi was here. "Uncle master, I'm with Fengjie." Duan Yi's voice was a little stupefied. At this moment, his mind was in a mess, and he completely ignored the fact that his wounds were still bleeding. "Uncle Master Duan, why don't you bandage your wounds first? I'm afraid that you won't be able to take it if you continue like this." Lu Xian stepped forward and whispered. Although she knew that it was impolite for them to interrupt when the venerable was talking, she saw that his body was shaking slightly, and his face was getting paler and paler. She was worried that his body would not be able to bear it. When the immortal venerables heard this, they looked at the wounds on Duan Yi's body. They saw large and small wounds all over his body. Some of the wounds were deep and were still bleeding. The blood had soaked his clothes. His face was pale due to the excessive blood loss. His body was swaying slightly as though he was about to fall. One of them said, "Let's go in first. Let's bandage the wound first. Immortal venerables, please come this way." City Lord Lu endured the injuries on his body and invited them to the front yard. At this time, the guards and servants who had been hiding in the city lord's mansion and had not come out came forward to help the injured people to the front. Behind him, Ishiran paused for a moment with his sword in hand, then followed. He also wanted to know if these immortal venerables had any way of finding out about Fengjiu's current situation. With Fengjiu's strength, he should be fine after entering the door of darkness. However, he did not know what was behind the door of darkness. What kind of place would the door of darkness teleport her to? Would he have a chance to come back? Even he did not know the answer to these questions. Perhaps, he could only find out from the people of the immortal sect. Chapter 2253. Tell us, what's going on? One of the Celestial Supremes asked as he glanced at the crowd. His eyes then fell on the two Celestial Supremes from the Cloud Jade Immortal Sect. One of the Celestial Supremes from the Cloud Jade Immortal Sect took a deep breath and said, "That's what happened." To sum everything up, Fengjiu was sucked into Shui Luo's door of darkness. Hearing this, the Celestial Supremes were startled. What do you mean by Fengjiu was sucked into Shui Luo's door of darkness? Fengjiu. They paused and looked at the person beside them and whispered, "Why does it sound so familiar?" Fengjiu is Ghost Dr. Fengjiu. He's the person we're looking for this time. Now that he's gone, we don't know where he was sent to after entering the door of darkness. That's why I'm done talking. The Celestial Supremes from the Cloud Jade Immortal Sect said inside. We have to report this to our sect and discuss countermeasures. Hearing this, the Celestial Supremes were shocked. Some stood up abruptly while others exclaimed, "What? Ghost Dr. Fengjiu? You're saying that Ghost Dr. Fengjiu from the Heavenly Pill Dispensary was sent into the door of darkness?" That's right. The Celestial Supremes from the Cloud Jade Immortal Sect nodded. How could this be? The few of them looked at each other in shock. They had come out this time for Ghost Dr. Fengjiu, now that she had been teleported into the door of darkness. How were they going to explain this? Do you know where he will be sent after entering the door of darkness? Ishiran asked as his gaze fell on the few of them. Hearing this, the few Celestial Supremes glanced at him and said, "We don't know. None of us have been sent into the door of darkness. We've never heard of anyone coming out after entering the door of darkness." Hearing this, Duanye's heart sank. No one has come out. He looked at the Celestial Supremes who spoke and asked, "What's the chance of survival after entering that place?" "It varies from person to person." The Immortal Venerable looked at them and said, "Although no one has ever come out after entering the door of darkness, it doesn't mean that they will die. It depends on their adaptability and ability to protect themselves." The Immortal Venerable stood up and walked around the hall with his hands clasped behind his back. According to legend, behind the door of darkness is the land of extreme evil. It's a sealed place where there are all kinds of abandoned villains, devil cultivators and evil cultivators. There are also all kinds of fierce beasts there. Some people can survive there while some die not long after entering. His voice paused for a moment before he said thoughtfully, "I've heard that there is a void that leads to the land of darkness. However, even I don't know where it is. However, I've heard from the sect leader that those who enter the door of darkness have a chance to return. However, I don't know what method they use to return. You are a celestial sovereign from the magnificent immortal sect." Ishiran looked at him and asked. The celestial sovereign glanced at Ishiran and nodded. "That's right. So if we ask your sect leader, he should know better." Ishiran asked the main point. Chapter 2254. Upon hearing the words of the Celestial Venerable of the Magnificent Immortal Sect, the other Celestial Venerables looked at each other and whispered among themselves. Then one of them said, "Let's return to our respective sects and report this matter to the sect leader. Duanyi, come back with us." The Cloud Jade Immortal Sect's Celestial Supremacy said to Duanyi, "I'm going to 100 River City's Heavenly Pill Dispensary." Duanyi shook his head. Now that something had happened to Fengjiu, he had to tell them about it. The two celestial supremacies didn't say anything. They only told him to be careful and pay more attention to his injuries. Thus, after settling the matter, they didn't stay for long and returned to their respective sects. Duanyi rested in the Lu estate and prepared to leave at dawn. Ishiran also left not long after the celestial supremacies left. On the other side, Fengjiu, who had been sucked into the whirlpool and transported into the door of darkness, was currently unconscious on a hillside. His surroundings were pitch black, and the air was filled with an eerie aura. The roars of ferocious beasts could be heard in the night, causing one to tremble in fear. A gust of night wind blew, and the eerily cold wind caused her body to instinctively shiver. Before she could open her eyes, she heard the faint sound of a bell ringing. When she heard the sound of the bell, her heart skipped a beat. She instantly opened her eyes and jumped up. Her divine sense regained its clarity. In her mind, she recalled the scene when she was sucked into the door of darkness. She couldn't help but look around. It was pitch black and there was nothing. She could only feel a gust of cold wind blowing, causing her hair to stand on end. Ring, ring, ring. The small purple bell on her waist made a series of ringing sounds. She had been wearing it ever since her sworn sister, Wanyan Qianhua, gave her this necklace. Now, she looked around and didn't see anything. However, the bell kept ringing, and the eerie cold wind in the air was even more bone-chilling. She didn't see anything, but she felt like she was surrounded by invisible things. The feeling of being targeted made her hair stand on end. She steadied her mind and lowered her head to look at the bell and small gourd at her waist. Only then did she stride forward. In the darkness of the night, there was still no shadow of anything. However, the bell on her waist was still ringing in the wind, making a faint ringing sound. In the night, the moonlight was covered by dark clouds. Only a little bit of moonlight spilled from the night sky. On this unknown path, a woman in a red dress with her hair draped over her shoulders was walking lightly. From afar, she really did look like a ghost. Behind her, a dozen shadowy figures floated in the night sky and followed her from afar, as though they had merged into one with the night sky, making it impossible for anyone to see their existence. Fengjiu walked along the path. Even if she didn't look back, even if she couldn't see the shadows around her, she knew that those things were following her. But where exactly was this place? What kind of place was she sucked into by the whirlpool? Why was the eerie aura here? Chapter 2255. After walking for a while, she felt that something was amiss. Especially when she walked along the small path and came to an open space. She saw some devil cultivators and heretic cultivators sitting in groups of 3 to 5, as well as some cultivators who were filled with murderous aura. Demonic cultivators and heretic cultivators aside, the cultivators who were filled with murderous aura and reeked of blood. Their murderous aura permeated the air. No matter how one looked at them, they did not look like ordinary itinerant cultivators. There were about 30 to 40 people sitting around the place she passed by. Some were sitting alone, some were sitting in groups of 2 or 3, and some had a ferocious beast lying beside them. Among these people, most of them were men, and there were only 1 or 2 women. Moreover, they were wearing revealing clothes and were hanging around some powerful cultivators. Her appearance naturally attracted the attention of these people. Whether it was evil cultivators, devil cultivators, or those cultivators who were filled with baleful qi and murderous intent, all of them looked at her strangely, sizing her up. In the eyes of these people, this woman in red was like a demon that had descended to the world. She walked slowly with the moonlight behind her back. Her red clothes were enchanting, and her black hair was draped over her shoulders. There was a cold and indifferent expression on her beautiful face. There wasn't the slightest bit of qi around her, but it was enough to make everyone wary. In such a place, how could a person without ability survive? This woman's appearance was enough to topple cities. Her red dress was still dazzling in the night, and it was so clean that it was not stained with blood. Such a person was naturally strange. Moreover, the moment she appeared, the surrounding air became a bit colder. That kind of gloomy aura pervaded the air, and everyone could feel that kind of cold aura. However, this woman didn't seem to notice it at all. Her gaze swept across everyone indifferently, and she continued to walk forward without stopping. Unexpectedly, everyone was just looking at her. No one made a move, and no one made a sound. No one knew that Fengjio's heart was tense at this moment. With just a glance, she discovered that these people were all in the immortal sage realm. Some of them were even at the peak of the immortal sage realm. The stench of blood on these people was extremely heavy. Their baleful qi and murderous intent were also extremely heavy. Even the people she had personally nurtured didn't have such a bloodthirsty murderous intent. In this place, she restrained her profound energy aura and didn't reveal any of it, because she knew that if these people found out that she was a profound cultivator, they would probably attack her one after another. It was very likely that they would even join hands. When she passed by these people, she could only put on an indifferent face and assume the posture of an expert. Step by step, she walked past them unhurriedly. The slightest carelessness would cause them to question and investigate her, thus putting herself in danger. If he fell into the hands of these people, death would not be the easiest thing to do. If he fell into the hands of these people, it was extremely likely that his cultivation would be crippled, and he would become their plaything. Chapter 2256. Those people watched as she walked away step by step, gradually disappearing into the night. However, no matter how beautiful she was and how breathtaking they were, in the end, no one dared to make a move. This was because the chilling aura that had enveloped them had disappeared along with her departure. In a place like this, the ghosts were not the same as in other places. They were not easy to deal with. It was precisely because of this that they did not dare to act rashly. Even though the woman in red had indeed caused their hearts to burn, and they had the urge to pounce on her, in the end, their rationality prevailed over the desire in their hearts. To be able to survive in this place, every one of them was very clear about the way of survival here. Those that they could not afford to provoke, they could not afford to provoke. Otherwise, it was very likely that they would pay with their lives. Fengjio only stopped when she was about 500 meters away from that place. She turned around and frowned. After pondering for a moment, she took out the Aurora transfer scroll from her space. This treasure could be transferred back to any place. Although she did not know where this place was, as long as she was still on this mainland, she should be able to return. She held the Aurora transfer scroll in her hand and looked around. There was still nothing, but that eerie feeling that made one's hair stand still remained. She knew that those things were still staring at her. However, if those things did not dare to make a move on her, why did they keep following her? Could it be that they were looking for an opportunity? After scanning her surroundings, she looked at the teleportation scroll in her hand and opened it. However, the moment the Aurora teleportation scroll opened, she was stunned. How could this be? She muttered to herself as she held the Aurora teleportation scroll tightly in her hands. Her eyes were fixed on it. In the past, every time she opened the transfer scroll, the name of the place would float up, and the transfer scroll would emit a ray of light. However, at this moment it was completely calm. Those words lay there quietly. They did not float, nor did they emit any light. Even when she injected her dark force into them, there was no movement. She could not help but feel a sense of oppression. It was as if there was a ray of hope, a ray of light, but it was suddenly shattered. She could not help but take a deep breath as she tried to calm her fluctuating emotions. She held the transfer scroll in her hand and tried again, but there was still no reaction. In the end, she could only put the transfer scroll away. She braced herself for the next step and the danger she would face. The sky was still dark. Therefore, she sat down cross-legged on the ground and closed her eyes to think. At the same time, she released her divine sense to pay attention to the movements around her. The moment she released her divine sense, she felt that there were still one or two divine senses locked onto her. She knew that there were still some people among those people who were observing her. They didn't dare to make a move now, because they had guesses and were afraid. However, when their guesses and fears couldn't stop their desires, they would definitely make a move on her. At that time, with her strength alone, how could she resist a few dozen celestial saints? Bye. Chapter 2257. When the sky gradually brightened, she could feel that the cold aura around her had yet to dissipate. The bell on her waist was still gently shaking, making a ringing sound. Thus, she lit a small pile of grass and used the fog to block her vision to flash into her space. When the fog gradually dissipated and the sky gradually brightened, the surrounding ghosts were unable to find the red figure. Each and every one of them lingered around, unwilling to leave. It was as if they didn't believe that she could disappear without a trace under their watchful eyes. When the sun rose, the cultivators began to leave one after another. Some of them came over, but when they saw that the red-clothed woman was no longer there, their eyes flashed with a strange light. That's right. That person doesn't look like an ordinary person. Perhaps she really is a powerful person. Otherwise, how could a woman like her dare to strut around in front of them without fear? Since they couldn't find the woman, everyone began to leave one after another. Only one or two people swept their eyes over the air, as if they could feel that the cold aura was still pervading the air. However, they couldn't find the woman's figure in the surroundings, so they didn't stay. In the space, Fengjie was sitting cross-legged as she stared at the scene outside. Her eyes flashed with a strange light, and her expression was unclear, as if she was thinking about something. Only when she saw that those people had left did she close her eyes to rest. After resting, she would go out and find a way to find out where this place was, and how to return to Hundred Rivers City. The morning quietly passed by. At noon, after resting in the space for an entire morning, her originally tense mind relaxed a bit. She wasn't in a hurry to go out. Instead, she changed her appearance in the space and put on a few more sets of clothes. Finally, she put on a set of shabby clothes. Looking at her reflection in the mirror, she couldn't help but reveal a satisfied smile. The person in the mirror had changed from a beautiful woman to a bearded man. Due to wearing many sets of clothes, although he wasn't rough, he still had the appearance of a man. There was a frightening scar on his face that stretched from the top corner of his left eye to the bottom corner of his right eye. His thick and heavy eyebrows set off his ferocious face, making him exude a murderous aura that kept people away. Not only did she change her appearance, but she also changed her appearance from head to toe. Even those immortal sage experts, or even immortal venerables, wouldn't be able to see through her disguise. With her current appearance, she believed that it would be easier for her to blend in with those people. Moreover, she wouldn't attract their attention. On the contrary, it would be safer and less troublesome than when she was a woman in red. All right. Now, I'm only missing a large blade, she muttered softly, and looked at the pile of weapons in her space. Then she picked out a sharp blade that was about 4 fingers wide. She carried the large blade on her shoulder, and went to the spirit spring. Looking at the surface of the water, she raised her thick eyebrows and glared with her sharp eyes. In an instant, she looked like a fierce and rough man. Not bad, not bad. Chapter 2258. The noon sun was a little glaring, but when she appeared in this place, she still felt a cold aura. Moreover, the bell on her waist rang again. She frowned slightly and glanced at her surroundings before walking forward. Indeed, they were not ordinary ghosts. They dared to appear under the scorching sun, but they did not dare to get close to her. Since that was the case, she would just ignore them. She threw out an ordinary flying instrument and gradually shook off the ghosts behind her. Only when she saw a city gate in the distance did she get down from the flying instrument. Black Mountain City? She muttered these 3 words and was slightly surprised. What kind of place was this? Looking ahead, he saw several demonic cultivators guarding the city gate. However, it seemed as if there was no one inside the city. It was very quiet. Should she go in? She hesitated and hid her aura behind a tree. She sat down behind a tree by the roadside and wanted to observe for a while before making a decision. However, she sat here for about an hour and no one came out, not to mention going in. Just as she was about to leave, she saw a group of devil cultivators, heretic cultivators, and itinerant cultivators walking over. She took a look and saw that there were about 20 people in the group. They were walking together with an arrogant aura. Before they even got close, their loud and wanton voices could already be heard. Those people must be dreaming, A beautiful woman in red? Ha 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 ha, we've been active in this area for so long, and have never seen any beautiful woman. How could such a person appear in a place like this? That's right. From what I see, they want to take the opportunity to join our Black Mountain City and become one of our people. They don't have any power to rely on here, and can only rely on those scattered people. I reckon it won't be long before they're killed or robbed. They don't even see that it's so easy to enter our Black Mountain City. Even if they make up a story, they can't make it more believable. In such an evil place, female cultivators are rare, not to mention a beautiful woman in red. That's right. Master even told us to go outside and capture some female cultivators. However, we didn't meet any female cultivators on this trip. Even if there were, they were protected by some stronger people. It's not easy to find a woman here. Who asked those who were exiled to the land of all evil to be so many evil people? Female cultivator? Hee, I reckon there are a few banshees. The group of people talked and laughed as they walked towards the city. When they were about to enter the city, one of them suddenly turned around and looked around. What's wrong? One of them asked as he turned around to take a look. Why do I feel like someone is watching us? As the man spoke, he scanned the surroundings with his bloodthirsty eyes. He released his divine sense, but he didn't detect anyone else's aura. Others. Ha ha ha. The man next to him laughed and patted him on the shoulder. You're worrying too much. Don't you know where you are? Who dares to come here? What's more, in front of our city gate, there's a barrier laid down by Master. Other than those who wear our waist tokens, who else can enter? Who would be so foolish as to rush to their deaths? Hearing this, the person nodded and said, that's true. I was thinking too much. Then he followed his people and went through the barrier before entering the city gate. Chapter 2259. After making a round, she entered the forest. She leaped onto a big tree to rest as she thought about the news she had heard earlier. What the hell was this place? She frowned. She really had no idea what to do now. She originally thought that Black Mountain City was a populated town, but now it seemed that Black Mountain City was a place similar to a bandit's stronghold. That place could not be entered at all. Just as she was thinking, she suddenly heard the roar of a ferocious beast. She quickly snapped back to her senses and saw a group of ferocious beasts that looked like dogs, but were not dogs. They were about half the height of a person and were running towards her. They were barking nonstop. The black dog that was running in front kicked its hind legs and pounced forward. It pounced towards her, scaring her so much that she instinctively let out a low cry. She retreated and fell from the tree. Damn it! What kind of dog is this? After she steadied herself, she looked at the ferocious beast that was half the height of a person and had two sharp fangs. It looked like a wild dog, but its body was surging with a dark aura. It let out a low growl and stared at her with its teeth bared. When it approached her step by step, she immediately broke into a run. Roar! Owa! Dozens of big black ferocious dogs chased after her on all fours. In order to avoid this group of ferocious beasts, she took out the medicine bag at her waist and sprinkled it behind her. She quickened her pace, and not long after, she shook off the group of ferocious beasts behind her. When she came to a place, she half bent her waist and placed her hands on her knees. She gasped for breath and looked back. When she saw that they did not chase after her, she sat down on the ground. What is this? It's actually chasing me? She sneered and said self-deprecatingly. A dragon in the shallows will be teased by shrimps. A tiger in the plains will be bullied by dogs. This is the situation right now, isn't it? She had inexplicably arrived here and could not return. She did not even know where this place was. All she met were either fiendish cultivators, heretic cultivators, or evil people. Even a group of ferocious beasts that looked like dogs was chasing after her and barking. Her mood was about to explode. However, at this moment, a demonic cultivator appeared not far away. When he noticed the figure sitting on the ground, he immediately restrained his aura and walked forward step by step. When he was about 5 meters away, he suddenly attacked the person. Fungjio was currently on the verge of exploding when she felt the murderous aura coming from behind her. This time, she did not choose to avoid the battle. Instead, She quickly turned around and slashed out with the large saber in her hand. Her profound energy aura also followed the slash of the large saber in her hand, and a sharp and intimidating saber aura streaked across the air. Swish! The demonic cultivator was shocked and quickly retreated. However, he was still one step too late. His abdomen was still cut by the blade energy. His clothes were torn. His flesh was cut open and blood seeped out. The sudden pain caused him to instinctively let out a muffled groan. He covered his wound with one hand and quickly retreated. He vigilantly stared at the man who had turned around. Previously, the man did not seem to have any aura surging from his body, but in an instant, he exploded with such a strong combat ability. Just one attack had injured him, and he could not help but be shocked. He wanted to escape from this dangerous person, so he slowly moved back step by step. Chapter 2260. What are you trying to do? The demonic cultivator's voice trembled as he felt the aura of death enveloping him. He could not help but feel regret. If he had known earlier, he would not have attacked this person while he was alone. Fengjiu stared at him without saying a word. Instead, the dark energy in her body surged. She stabbed the large saber in her hand into the ground, and in the next moment, her figure flashed and her fist, which contained a strong dark energy, swung violently. Whoosh! Bang bang bang! The sound of her fists landing on the ground was heard. The demonic cultivator was stunned for a moment. He could not dodge in time, and took a direct hit from Fengjiu's fists, which contained a strong hidden force. Every punch contained a hidden force. When it landed, it was as if a heavy iron hammer had struck down. The muffled banging sound was unusually clear, and occasionally, there was the crisp sound of bones breaking. Screams of agony rang out in the forest, startling the birds in the forest, and causing them to flap their wings and fly away. Some of the cultivators in the forest heard the screams, and each of them had a different expression on their faces. However, no one went near the source of the sound. This kind of thing happened too often. Sometimes, meddling in other people's business would cause them to lose their lives. Surviving in this kind of place, all they had to do was to survive. The screams of agony grew weaker and weaker. However, at this moment Fengjiu, who had vented her anger, stopped. She stepped on the demonic cultivator whose face was bruised and swollen, and was on the verge of death, and asked, "Do you want to live?" When the demonic cultivator, who was already powerless to resist, heard this, he quivered and hurriedly replied, "Yes. Yes." The person in front of him was like a demon in his eyes. He had thought that he would be beaten to death. Since he had asked this question, did that mean that he had a chance of survival? "Even if you want me to follow you, I will agree. As long as you spare my life and don't kill me," the demonic cultivator said as he looked at Fengjiu. His eyes were filled with a strong will to live. "Let me ask you, where is this place?" Fengjiu asked in a low voice. Not only had she changed her appearance, even her voice had become hoarse and masculine. Hearing this, the demonic cultivator was stunned, as if he did not expect Fengjiu to ask this question. He pointed at Fengjiu's foot on his chest and said, "Can you let me sit up first?" "Speak." Fengjiu's voice, and increased the force of her foot. The demonic cultivator groaned, and blood flowed from his mouth, and a trace of fear in his eyes. I'll speak. The demonic cultivator hurriedly said, enduring the pain in his body. "This is the land of extreme evil. It is a place set up by the 4 great immortal emperors. Those who enter this place cannot leave. In this land of extreme evil there are 8 great villains. Each of them occupies 8 mountains, and they have many cultivators under them. If you follow them, other than having food to fill your stomach, your safety will also be guaranteed. However, if you submit to them, you will have to acknowledge them as your master. Therefore, some cultivators who do not want to be bound are scattered all over this place. They specialize in killing cultivators and stealing things for a living. Chapter 2261. That's right. This place that was carved out by the immortal emperors is isolated from the original mainland. The food here is also limited, and most of the food is taken by the 8 great villains. Although we are devil cultivators, we don't have any fasting pills in this place, so we can only find food to fill our stomachs. So most of the time, we snatch and kill those we can kill to reduce the wastage of resources. Is there really no way to leave this place? She asked with a frown. This is a barrier and array set up by the immortal emperors, and it was set up by 4 immortal emperors together. Naturally, it's not something that we can break. Moreover, there are restrictions here. Anyone who enters this place, no matter if they are devil cultivators, heretic cultivators, or cultivators from the righteous path, will remain at the same level of strength they had when they entered. No one can raise their strength or advance in here. As the devil cultivator spoke, his face became increasingly pale, and a mouthful of blood spilled from his mouth. His body was covered with injuries, and even if she didn't kill him, it would be difficult for him to survive here. Hearing this, Fengjiu's eyes flashed. It was indeed a restriction. It was precisely because of that restriction that her Aurora teleportation array was unable to be used here. But fortunately, although there was a restriction here, her spiritual energy and profound energy were not restricted. Otherwise, she would really be dead if she entered here. Tell me all the powers here. She retracted her leg. Since this place was set up by the 4 immortal emperors, there must be a way to break it. She did not believe that anyone who entered this place could not leave. Cough cough I. Pft. He sat up and spat out a mouthful of blood. His body was on the verge of collapse, as if he would collapse at any time. Seeing this, Fengjiu frowned. This person was a devil cultivator, and she had hit him with all her might just now. Every punch contained a force of 1,000 pounds, and she did not need to look to know that his internal organs were all damaged. She had never been kind to people who wanted her life, not to mention this person was a devil cultivator. However, she still wanted to find out other things from him, so it was not appropriate to let him die like this. Hence, she turned her palm and 3 silver needles pierced out, smoothing out his blood flow. Feeling the abnormality in his body, the devil cultivator was slightly startled and looked at the man in front of him with a pale face. You won't die, speak, she said in a low voice. His body was indeed much better than before. Thus, the demonic cultivator told him everything that Fengjiu wanted to know, and everything that he already knew. After obtaining the information she wanted to know, Fengjiu glanced at the demonic cultivator on the ground and said, I'll let you off this time. Next time, you better not let me see you again. With that, she turned and left. After walking out of the forest, she threw out the aircraft and jumped on it. Stepping on the aircraft, she took off from the ground and flew all the way to the sky. Since he had set up a formation and barrier, he had to see what kind of formation and barrier it was before he could think of a way to leave this place. Her figure slowly rose. The further she was from the ground, the greater the pressure above her head. Even though she had the might of an ancient divine beast in her body, she could still feel the invisible pressure spreading throughout the sky. Chapter 2262. Who is that? Why is he up there? That idiot, is he trying to escape from here? Doesn't he know where he is? If we could escape so easily, would we still be locked up here? People who have been here for a while wouldn't do such a stupid thing. Could it be that this person just came in? The people below were discussing in groups of 3 to 5. They were a little curious about the person who was trying to break through the barrier above. Therefore, all of their gazes fell on that person. Some wanted to watch a good show. Because of the restriction here, when they reached a certain height on their flying swords or flying artifacts, they would be pressed down by the powerful pressure above. It was the feeling of weightlessness that came from being directly pressed down from the sky. It was as if the spiritual energy in their bodies was instantly suppressed. Immediately after, a huge mountain pressed down on them from above with a bang, making it impossible for them to dodge or bear the pressure and fall from above. Those who were pressed down by the pressure from above, even if they didn't die, would be half dead. At the very least, they had seen several cultivators and devil cultivators who tried to leave from above. They were pressed down by the pressure and directly fell to their deaths. At this moment, Fengjiu was completely unaware that although the higher she went, the stronger the pressure was. However, She had the pressure of an ancient divine beast in her body. Moreover, her spiritual power was different from ordinary people. Others couldn't withstand it, but she could. Therefore, when she reached the top and stood on top of the artifact and looked down, the people below were so small that they couldn't be seen. She tried to go up again, but she couldn't because her hands touched a barrier that couldn't be seen with the naked eye. It was this barrier that had blocked her way, and it was also this barrier that had trapped her here. She tried several times, but was unable to break through this barrier. Thus, she stood on this high ground and looked down at the surroundings. Because she stood at a high place, she could see far. With a glance, she could see everything here. When she saw everything clearly, her expression couldn't help but change slightly. Is this the masterpiece of the 4 great immortal emperors? With the strength of an immortal emperor, could it be that they could move mountains and seas and set up a prison? She muttered softly. She was shocked, emotional, and excited. The scene in front of her was something she had never seen before. Looking around, she saw 8 mountains surrounding a region filled with clouds and mist. It was very spectacular, and this region was where she was now. Even from such a high place, she could only see the region around the 8 mountains. Behind the 8 mountains was a vast expanse of white. This place was indeed as the demonic cultivator had said. It was a place that was isolated and divided. However, upon closer inspection, one would be able to see that this place was an enormous formation. The formation was divided into 8 mountain peaks, and a grand formation was set up. A place like this, was clearly a region floating in the sky. Her heart trembled and her eyes widened. Her blood began to boil as she carefully memorized the layout of the area. Then she took a deep breath and slowly exhaled, suppressing the excitement in her heart. Chapter 2263. The cultivators below did not know what Fengjie was thinking, nor did they know what she saw above. However, everyone saw that the figure had risen extremely high into the sky. However, the scene of the figure being pressed down did not appear, and they could not help but feel puzzled. Why did that cultivator go up and not be pressed down by the restriction? Could it be that the restriction in the sky has been removed? Many cultivators muttered softly. Looking at the figure standing in the sky, many people below were slightly moved. Thinking about it, if that cultivator could reach the top, then with their strength and cultivation, they should be able to reach the top as well. After so long, they hadn't been able to clearly see the surroundings of the area they were in. Now that that cultivator had taken the lead, they could give it a try. I want to go up and see. Who dares to go with me? A demonic cultivator stood up and looked at the cultivators sitting around him. Hearing this, those people glanced at him and could not help but fall silent. They did not want to cause trouble, so no one answered the demonic cultivator. Puffed. Since no one dares, I'll go up myself. Seeing that no one dared to stand up, the demonic cultivator immediately looked at the figure in the sky. If that person was fine, he would naturally be fine too. Furthermore, they all knew that this place had been set up with a formation and a barrier. If they wanted to leave, they might have to break the formation and the barrier to escape this place. If they went up to the sky, they might be able to obtain unexpected gains. Therefore, he threw out his flying sword and rode it towards the sky. The people below watched as the demonic cultivator rode his flying sword straight up. Not long after, he was high up in the sky. However, looking at the distance, he seemed to be much lower than the figure in the sky. Moreover, his figure stopped high up in the sky and could not go any further. It seems that he can't go up either. That's his limit, someone said as he looked at the figure that was trying to fly up again. At this time, he was already kneeling down. He couldn't even raise his head, as if he was being pressed down by something. Then in the instant that everyone was stunned, they saw the figure in the sky instantly fall from the sky with a whoosh. Adat, the demonic cultivator, cried out in alarm. The spiritual power in his entire body was suppressed at that moment. His body felt as if it was being pressed down by a mountain, and he instantly fell from the sky and crashed heavily to the ground. When the cultivators below saw this scene, they couldn't help but be shocked. That person was originally flying up on his sword around them. Now that he fell down from above, he directly fell towards where they were. Everyone was so shocked that they instantly jumped up and retreated. Boom! Bang! There was a loud bang, and amidst the screams, it was as if a heavy object had fallen from the sky. It heavily smashed into the ground, causing the ground where they were standing to tremble slightly. Immediately after, dust and smoke filled the air, and powerful spiritual energy fluctuations rippled out from the surroundings. The dust and smoke blocked everyone's line of sight. Everyone held their breaths. When the dust and smoke gradually dissipated, they saw a hole that was several meters wide, about 10 meters in front of them. Chapter 2264. However, at this moment the demonic cultivator was lying there motionlessly. There was no sign of life on his body. His spirit force was suppressed. After falling from such a high place, his bones were broken, and his flesh was mangled. Only his eyes were filled with fear. Even in death, he was still unable to close his eyes. Seeing the demonic cultivator at the peak of the fairy realm die like this, the surrounding people had different expressions. They couldn't help but look up at the figure in the sky who hadn't come down yet. At this moment, Fengjie was about to come down. Because she heard the sound, she went to look in that direction. Previously, when that person flew up on his sword, she had noticed it. However, she didn't expect that the other party would only reach such a height before being forcibly suppressed. Thinking of the restriction here, her eyes moved slightly. It seemed that if one didn't have powerful spiritual energy and the pressure of an ancient divine beast like her, they wouldn't be able to reach such a height. However, this was also good. The others couldn't see the layout of this area. She withdrew her gaze and came down from the sky. When the people below saw the person coming down, some of them rushed in that direction. Anyone could see that something was wrong. That person wasn't suppressed by the restriction when he went up. It was obvious that there was something extraordinary about him. Why don't they go over and ask if he saw anything different when he went up? However, when Fengjie came down from the sky and felt that there was no one around, she flashed into the space. When those cultivators rushed over, they couldn't find any trace of Fengjie. In the space, Fengjie recalled the layout of this area and drew it. After a long time, she held the diagram and looked at it. This is a great restrictive formation that combines a spirit barrier and a formation. Then, as long as she can break it, the restrictive formation here will also disappear. She softly murmured. She took the blueprint and looked at it, then finally put it away. Right now, in addition to breaking the restriction, it was also very important to increase her strength. Compared to the others here, her advantage was that she had the space. The restriction outside didn't have any effect in this space. Since this was the case, she could increase her strength here first. If she increased her strength, she might be able to break the seal on her spiritual energy. At that time, if she wanted to break the restriction, she would need the help of spiritual energy. After making up her mind, she sat down cross-legged and began to cultivate here. At the same time, due to the fact that two cultivators had flown into the sky at the same time, one of them had remained in the sky for a long time before slowly descending, while the other was forcefully suppressed by a restriction halfway up. With this comparison, it became even more obvious that this matter was unusual, and because of this, the news quickly spread. When the demonic cultivator in Black Mountain City heard this, he smiled playfully. "Is this true?" He hugged a plump woman beside him and stared at the demonic cultivator, who reported this matter. "Master, it's true. The news has already spread. I think the other experts who have their own territories will also receive the news soon." The devil cultivator below said. "Many people saw this. It can't be fake." Chapter 2265. Didn't I order you to search for her? What? You still haven't found her? Hearing this, the demonic cultivator quickly lowered his head and said, "Forgive us, master. We sent out 2 teams to search outside, but there was no news of the woman in red. However, we found some cultivators who had seen her before. According to their understanding, she didn't have the slightest bit of aura. Moreover, wherever she went, the air around her became colder, as if she was being chased by a ghost." Speaking of this, the demonic cultivator paused for a moment before continuing. It's because of this that those cultivators didn't dare to make a move against her. However, other than that one time when she appeared, no one has seen her before. Therefore, your subordinates are guessing that she might be. What might she be? The demonic cultivator in the main seat narrowed his eyes and asked. Your subordinates are guessing that the woman in red might be a ghost in red. After saying this, the demonic cultivator stopped and didn't dare to continue. Hearing this, the demonic cultivator in the main seat couldn't help but pause for a moment. He looked at the demonic cultivator below and said, Let's put this matter aside for now. Go find the man with the scar on his face, and bring him back after you find him. I'm curious, how did he manage to get so high up in the sky? Yes, the demonic cultivator replied and left. Several other places also received the same news. Therefore, out of surprise and doubt, they also sent people to search for the man with the scar on his face. They wanted to bring him back and ask him what was so special about him. However, while everyone in this area began to search for Fengjiu and set off a frenzy, Fengjiu was cultivating in the space and was completely unaware of what was happening outside. On the other side, 100 River City, Heavenly Pill Building. When Fengjiu's news of his safety reached the Heavenly Pill Building, Guan Xilin and Mo Chun were sitting in the backyard of the Heavenly Pill Building and discussing matters. After receiving the news, Leng Hua brought the news to the backyard and handed it to Guan Xilin. This is the news that Master sent back from the Tianyuan Palace branch in Luha City. Hearing this, Guan Xilin glanced at Mo Chun and took the letter. After removing the watermark on it, he opened it and saw the words written on it. Guan Xilin smiled and handed the letter to Mo Chun at the same time, saying to them, This is the letter that Xiaojiu sent back to tell us that she's safe and sound. She told us that she's fine and is on her way back. Hearing this, Leng Hua also smiled. It's good that she's fine. I'm going to tell everyone so that they won't worry. Guan Xilin smiled as he watched Leng Hua nod and leave. He then looked at Mo Chun and saw that Mo Chun was holding the letter with a pensive look on his face. He didn't know what Mo Chun was thinking about. What's wrong? Is there something wrong? Mo Chun raised his eyes and glanced at him. He shook his head and handed the letter back to him. I can't put my finger on it. I just find it strange. What's strange? Guan Xilin asked. Chapter 2266. Hearing this, Guan Xilin also felt that it made sense. If she wanted to come back, wouldn't it be faster and more convenient to use the Aurora transmission scroll? However, she didn't use it and chose to fly back. Could it be that something happened to her? Maybe she just has some things to deal with. Guan Xilin said. He felt that since she could escape from the demon cultivator, there shouldn't be any big problems. Maybe she encountered something on the way, so she didn't choose to use the Aurora transmission scroll. Maybe. However, she's the star of the Phoenix, so she's also a person blessed by the heavens. She has great luck, so naturally, she'll have more disasters than ordinary people. Mo Chun sighed softly. I should have followed her closely, but I didn't expect that after coming here, I wouldn't be able to see her for a few days. Don't worry, she'll be fine, Guan Xilin said. It wasn't clear if he was comforting Mo Chun or himself. After 3 days, Duan Yi finally arrived at the Heavenly Pill Dispensary in 100 River City. He entered and looked around the first floor of the Heavenly Pill Dispensary. Looking at the pills placed on the first floor, his eyes flashed slightly. In such a place, there were so many high-grade medicinal pills. Only Fengjiu could do this. This place was filled with her aura from the inside out. Whether it was the rules written on the walls of the Heavenly Pill Dispensary, the people who received her here, or the pills placed in the cabinets, they all had her unique style. Young Master Duan? Leng Hua looked at the person who came, and was slightly surprised. Duan Yi glanced at him and nodded. I have something to tell you. Hearing this, Leng Hua looked at him and said, Please come with me. He took him to the backyard, and asked someone to invite Guan Xilin over. After serving him tea, Leng Hua asked, Weren't you with my master? Why did I only see you? Where's my master? Later, Guan Xilin asked someone to ask the people in Luhi City, and found out that Duan Yi was by his master's side at that time. However, He didn't expect Duan Yi to come at this time and come alone. Leng Hua, is Xiaojiu back? Guan Shilin's voice could be heard even before he arrived. He strode in from outside. As soon as he entered the courtyard, he saw Duan Yi, who was sitting in the middle of the courtyard, looking around but not seeing Fengjiu. He couldn't help but be slightly surprised. Is Xiaojiu back? Duan Yi stood up and bowed slightly to Guan Shilin before saying, something happened to her and she can't come back. Upon hearing this, Guan Shilin's expression changed. He strode forward and put his hands on Duan Yi's shoulders. Something happened to Xiaojiu? What happened? Why couldn't he come back? What's going on? Due to Guan Shilin's strength, Duan Yi's shoulders hurt, but he didn't shout or scream. He just looked at them with a face full of guilt. It's all because of me. Leng Hua noticed that Duan Yi's expression wasn't quite right. He also saw Guan Shilin's strong grip on his shoulders. Only then did he step forward and say to Guan Shilin, don't be anxious. Let him go and let him speak in detail. Hearing this, Guan Shilin took a deep breath and let go of Duan Yi. Seeing that Duan Yi's expression wasn't very good, he said, sorry, I forgot myself. He paused, looked at him and asked, are you injured? Chapter 2267. Guan Shilin and Leng Hua glanced at each other, then walked up to him. One of them sat down while the other stood. What do you think happened to Xiaojiu? Guan Shilin asked in a deep voice. Could it be that Emochen was right? Did Xiaojiu encounter some kind of disaster again? We met Xue Luo, one of the 10 great demons under the Demon Lord's command in Luha City. Duan Yi told them everything in detail. Finally, he said, because of this, she was sucked into the door of darkness. Xue Luo was killed by the immortal sovereigns of the major immortal sects who arrived later. I asked the immortal sovereigns, but they knew very little about the door of darkness. That's why I rushed over to tell you about it. I want to discuss it with you and see if you have any ideas. The two of them fell into deep thought when they heard that. They were not from the upper reaches of the continent, so they did not know much about the matters here, let alone the matter of the door of darkness. When they heard Duan Yi's words, they only knew that the situation was very serious, but there was nothing they could do. How about this? You stay here and heal your injuries. I'll go find Emochen. He's the disciple of Tianji Elder. I think he should know about the door of darkness. Perhaps he'll have some ideas. Guan Shilin stood up and said. Hearing this, Duan Yi nodded. That's the only thing we can do. Leng Hua, he's injured. Have Fan Lin take a look at him and see what kind of pill he needs to take. Take it from the building and give it to him. Guan Shilin instructed. Okay, I understand. Leng Hua nodded. After watching him leave the courtyard, he said, Young Master Duan, please take a seat. I'll call Fan Lin over. No need to trouble yourself. My internal injuries will heal in a few days. Duan Yi said, then continued. Back then, Fengjiu gave me a lot of pills, and when I came over, I had already consumed the inner core. After Fan Lin looks at you, if he says you don't need to use it, then don't use it. If your internal injuries haven't healed, then it won't be too late to take another pill. Leng Hua said, then said to him, Sit down, I'll be right back. He walked forward, and before long, he brought Fan Lin over to take Duan Yi's pulse. On the other side, Guan Shilin left the Heavenly Pill building and headed towards Nailin Manor. He was led to Emochen's courtyard by a servant. As soon as he saw Emochen, before he could speak, Emochen asked, But what happened? Hearing this, Guan Shilin strode to the stone table in the courtyard and sat down. He glanced at him and said, Your mouth is really accurate. You were right, something happened to Xiaojiu. Hearing this, Emochen was not surprised. He walked slowly with his hands behind his back, sat down at the table and asked, What happened? Where is she now? How did you get the news? It was in Luhi City. She and Duan Yi met Xue Luo, one of the top 10 demonic cultivators, in the city lord's mansion. They were sucked into the door of darkness opened by Xue Luo, and now we don't know where they are. Guan Shilin said angrily and asked, What's going on with this door of darkness? Where will they be sent to after being sucked in? Why did Duan Yi say that even the senior immortal of the immortal sect doesn't know where the door of darkness leads to? Do you know? Chapter 2268. So we'll just leave her be. What if something happens that she can't solve herself? Guan Shilin said worriedly. Imochen smiled gently. Compared to this, I think it's more important for you to help her guard the Heavenly Pill building. Otherwise, if the news of her being sucked into the door of darkness spreads, someone will harm the Heavenly Pill building. Humph. Who dares to have designs on the Heavenly Pill building? If one comes, I'll kill one. If two come, I'll kill two. He snorted coldly. His voice was sonorous and powerful, and his eyes were sharp and contained a murderous aura. Seeing this, Imochen smiled and said, since the people from the 4 major immortal sects already know that she's the Phoenix Star, you don't have to worry about her being sucked into the door of darkness. The people from the sects will think of a way. You should go back first. Appease her subordinates, and tell them not to worry. When the time comes, she'll naturally return. If that's the case, I'll go back first. Guan Shilin stood up and saluted him before taking his leave. After the people from the 4 major immortal sects heard the news, they gathered at the Huaxian sect to discuss Fengjiu, who did not know what was happening here, was cultivating in that space. As time passed, more than half a month had passed, but she was unable to break through the threshold of the realm. In the space, she opened her eyes and exhaled lightly. Her eyebrows were slightly knitted. I'm missing an opportunity. It seems that I have to go outside. With her current strength at the peak of the Black Martial God realm, it would be difficult for her to advance further, especially since the spiritual power in her body was still sealed and could not complement each other. Thus, she could only look for an opportunity to advance. Therefore, she stood up and looked at her current appearance. Finally, she thought about it and changed her makeup. Many cultivators had seen the heavenly imperial equipment when it was high up in the sky. In addition, there was the scene of the devil cultivator being suppressed by the restriction. She estimated that if she went out with this appearance, she would definitely be targeted by those people. Since that was the case, she would change her makeup again. Anyway, to her, changing her appearance was just a matter of moving her hands and feet. After changing her appearance, it would save her a lot of trouble. Why not? Immediately, she began to fiddle with it. This time, she used her usual appearance when she was outside. He couldn't be said to be the most outstanding, but he was delicate and handsome. Coupled with his green robes, he looked somewhat cultured and refined. He was somewhat different from those people who were filled with murderous intent. If this person is outstanding, he can't hide it even if he wants to. She looked at the green figure reflected in the spring water, looked at the handsome face of the young man, and chuckled. Who asked me to have such an elegant demeanor? My bearing is out of the ordinary. So be it. It's also pleasing to the eye. She muttered to herself with a hint of a smile and smugness in her voice. If someone familiar with her was by her side, they would definitely say that she was overly narcissistic. She used her divine sense to check the surroundings. Seeing that the surroundings were very peaceful, and there were no cultivators around, she flashed out of the space. She flicked her green clothes and brushed her sleeves. Only then did she walk forward in a relaxed and happy mood, humming a little tune. Chapter 2269. However, this place was filled with devil cultivators and evil people. If she were to break the barrier and the formation one day, how would she deal with the people here? Thinking of this, she fell into deep thought. It seemed like she had to reorganize everyone here before breaking the barrier. Right now, the most important thing was to increase her strength. Only when she was strong enough would she be able to suppress the people here. Should she kill them or keep them alive? It would all be decided by her strength. Then let's build a team first. Compared to those devil cultivators and evil cultivators, those ferocious cultivators still have their merits, she murmured as she walked towards the place where the rogue cultivators often appeared. She wanted to build a team of cultivators, a team that could deal with the devil cultivators and evil cultivators here. And these people could be found among the rogue cultivators here. She took out a fruit from the space and ate it. As she walked into the forest, she released her divine sense and paid attention to the movements around her. When she arrived in the forest, she could still see some devil cultivators sitting together. There were also some cultivators sitting around. These people were quietly sizing her up when she appeared. Her gaze swept past those devil cultivators and evil cultivators. Her gaze lingered on those cultivators. With a sweep of her divine sense, she could clearly see their strength and cultivation base. There were 13 cultivators here, and more than a dozen devil cultivators and evil cultivators. All of them were sitting around. Putting aside the devil cultivators for the time being, she roughly glanced at those cultivators. The weakest among them was at the peak of the nascent soul realm. Among them, most of them were at the fairy realm. There were also 3 or 4 who were at the peak of the fairy realm, and one who was at the intermediate level of the celestial sage realm. She looked at the cultivator at the intermediate level of the celestial sage realm. He was a middle-aged man. His clothes were tattered and torn in several places. His hair was not tied up neatly. A few strands of hair were scattered messily. Perhaps he noticed that she was sizing him up. He raised his eyes and looked at her. His gaze was sharp and terrifying. His eyes were filled with bloodthirsty killing intent. The murderous aura around him also spread out. Seeing this, her eyes flashed slightly. This person's strength was not bad. He would be a great help if she could recruit him. However, he was a cultivator at the intermediate level of the celestial sage realm. Such strength was already considered very strong in this place. It would not be easy to recruit him. According to the devil cultivator who had revealed the information to her, the rogue cultivators here were unwilling to be bound, unwilling to acknowledge a master and be controlled. Since that was the case, if she wanted to recruit them, she had to convince them, or have a reason for them to follow her willingly. She retracted her gaze. With a tap of her toes, she leaped onto a tree to rest. She did not care about the probing eyes on her. The surrounding rogue cultivators were all sizing up Feng 9. They saw that the man was dressed in a green robe. He was extremely clean, and he didn't look very old. They were very surprised to see such a person suddenly appear here. Chapter 2270. When they thought of this, many people had this thought. However, it was only a fleeting thought. After all, they didn't see the man and the woman together. Moreover, the woman didn't have the slightest bit of spirit energy around her, but the man's aura was profound chi. Profound cultivators were the least popular here. Even if they were at the Black Tortoise God level, their combat strength was probably not as good as a nascent soul cultivator. Furthermore, cultivators who had formed an alliance would usually go in and out together. That way, they would be able to look out for each other if anything happened. In the past half a month, the members of the 8 great organizations had been looking for the woman in red and the man with the scar. It was said that these people had already guessed that the 2 of them were in cahoots. After they had appeared, the 2 of them had disappeared together. It was obvious that they were hiding somewhere. We plan to go to the beast forest to get some food. Is there anyone who wants to work with us? A devil cultivator asked. Beside him sat another devil cultivator, who was at the peak of the fairy realm. Hearing this, the loose cultivators around them fell silent. No one spoke. Those who were familiar with these 2 devil cultivators knew that anyone who went with them would never return. Seeing that no one around them responded, the 2 of them looked at each other and stood up. One of them had a sinister and strange smile on his face. His gaze swept across the crowd and landed on the man in green who was alone on the tree. The 2 of them gestured to each other and walked towards the tree. They shouted at the man in green, "Hey, you're coming with us." When the crowd saw this, they looked at the young man on the tree with confused expressions. Are they going to bring the young man with them? Since they had invited him, the young man would probably not be able to escape. Some of the devil cultivators looked like they were watching a good show. Some of them had bloodthirsty excitement in their eyes. They could imagine what would happen to the man in green if he agreed to the invitation of the 2 devil cultivators. Even if he did not die in the beast forest, he would definitely be killed on the way back. If he did not agree to go with them, he would definitely die here. No matter what he chose, he would not be able to escape death in the end. Fengjiu, who was on the tree, glanced at the 2 people below. His eyes moved slightly as he looked at them and asked, "You want me to go with you to the beast forest?" "That's right," the devil cultivator below replied, his bloodthirsty eyes staring at him on the tree. Hearing this, Fengjiu rubbed his chin and asked, It's said that there are ferocious beasts everywhere, and even the people from the 8 factions don't dare to approach it. Not bad. The demonic cultivators responded once again. One of them had already placed his hand on the long sword at his waist. It was as if he would kill the young man if he refused. So you're saying that all the meat is in there? Her eyes lit up and excitement and anticipation appeared on her handsome face. Not bad, the demonic cultivator said good-naturedly. Staring at the young man's excited expression, he sneered in his heart. Even if all the meat was inside, the premise was that they had to have a way to kill the beasts. The beasts inside were all ferocious beasts. Even with their cultivation, it was difficult to kill a single one of them. Chapter 2271. Hearing the young man's straightforward response, the surrounding crowd was astonished for a moment. This was clearly a trap, and there was actually an idiot who would jump into it. Was there something wrong with this man's brain? I haven't eaten meat for a long time, and I'm craving it. Let's go. Since we're going, let's not waste time. Fengjiu said with a relaxed expression, and there was no fear on his face. The 2 demonic cultivators were also stunned for a moment, and looked suspiciously at the young man in front of them before finally saying, "Then let's go. Follow us." As they spoke, they flew on their swords and headed towards the direction of the fearsome beast forest. Seeing this, Fengjiu also flew on his sword and followed. After the 3 of them left, some of the cultivators began to discuss. Pfft, I wonder where this stupid kid came from. And he actually dares to follow those 2 to the fearsome beast forest? He's courting death. He's probably starving. Look at that kid. He doesn't have much meat on him. He probably hasn't smelled the aroma of meat for a long time. Not to mention that kid hasn't smelled the aroma of meat for a long time. I haven't eaten meat for 2 to 3 months. During this time, I've been picking some wild fruits in the forest to satisfy my hunger. Unfortunately, there are fewer and fewer places where we can find food. The people from the 8 peaks are too ruthless. Not only do they occupy the mountains, but they also snatch things and territory from us. They're trying to force us to our deaths. You want to eat meat? It's not like there isn't any. If you join any of the 8 peaks, you'll naturally be able to eat and drink well with them. Eat and drink well? Ha ha ha, don't make me laugh to death. Even the people from the 8 peaks eat meat separately. Don't you know? I heard last time that the people from the 8 peaks eat meat according to their strength. Even if you acknowledge them as your master, don't think that you'll be treated fairly. Hearing this, the people who were discussing fell silent. If it was before they were brought here, would they ever have to worry about food? Would they have to risk their lives to hunt beasts in the fearsome beast forest for a meal like now? With their strength, if they were in the outside world, they would be respected and looked up to wherever they went. However, today was different from the past. Everything was different now. On the other side, Fengjiu followed the 2 devil cultivators towards the beast forest. He flew on his sword and followed behind them at a leisurely pace. Looking at the 2 people in front of her, she asked, "Didn't the people from the 8 mountain peaks occupy the beast forest? How could he not want such a place?" Occupy? If they want to take it, they have to see if they have the ability to do so. A devil cultivator turned around and glanced at Fengjiu. "What kind of place do you think the vicious beast forest is?" In here, the vicious beast forest is also known as the land of death. However, not many people can enter it. Even if some people can enter it, no one is lucky enough to come out alive. Fengjiu smiled. "Oh, since that's the case, you still dare to bring me to that place?" The vicious beasts forest is isolated by a formation and boundary set up by the 4 great immortal emperors. Ordinary people can't enter it. Even if they do, they'll get lost in there and won't be able to come out. However, coincidentally, we know of a place that can lead to that place. Perhaps they felt that this young man would end up dead in the end. Hence, they did not hold back when they spoke. They even told Fengjiu about the secret passage that they knew. Chapter 2272. 2 days later in the evening we're here. This is the beast forest. The 2 devil cultivators in front stopped and turned around to look at Fengjiu. You haven't been here before, have you? No, this is my first time here. Fengjie said truthfully. While looking in front, he asked. There are barriers and arrays here. How do we get in? This way. The two cultivators led the way. After taking a detour, they came to a corner and lifted the surrounding weeds. One of them went in first. The other person said to Fengjie, You go down first. Seeing the two of them sandwiching her in the middle, she knew that they were just preventing her from running away. Thus, she followed the person in front and went in. When she stepped in, she felt that there were steps under her feet. However, it was pitch black inside, and she could not see any light. She could only walk down step by step. This is an underground tunnel? It shouldn't be you who dug it, right? This kind of place should be a tunnel dug by an earth attribute cultivator, using his own attribute. These two devil cultivators were not of the earth attribute. She guessed that it was not them who dug the tunnel. She just did not expect that the cultivator who dug the tunnel would think of this. The road above was covered with barriers and arrays. If he could not pass through, he would think of a way from underground. Unfortunately, this method could only be used here. If he wanted to break through the array and barrier of this place, he could not rely on digging a tunnel. This was because the outside of this floating place was surrounded by a powerful barrier. Moreover, it was a barrier set up by the 5 great immortal emperors. Even if he dug underground, he would not be able to break through this barrier. After walking in the darkness for a long time, she gradually saw a faint light in front of her. She quickened her pace and followed the devil cultivator in front of her out of the tunnel. However, the forest was terrifyingly quiet. Faintly, she could only hear 1 or 2 ferocious beast roars in the forest, but she could not tell the direction. What level are the ferocious beasts in here? Why haven't I seen a single vicious beast? Fengjie asked as he looked at the 2 devil cultivator. There are all kinds of fierce beasts here. As far as I know, there are even ancient fierce beasts here. However, it's best if we don't encounter those ancient fierce beasts. Otherwise, no one will be able to survive. A devil cultivator said as he took out something from his spatial ring to lure his prey. Fengjie saw that they were busy there, and they were using the method of trapping instead of killing. Thus, she glanced at the 2 of them and said, Why go through so much trouble? Since you want to lure that ferocious beast over, can't you just roar twice? The moment her voice fell, she raised her profound energy aura, and suddenly opened her mouth to shout. Adat, the loud voice suddenly rang out, giving the 2 devil cultivators a fright. Their faces turned ashen, as they stared at Fengjie with gloomy faces. What are you doing? Didn't he know that this would attract a lot of ferocious beasts? Are you trying to get us killed? Fengjie shrugged her shoulders innocently and said, Of course not. I only wanted to lure some ferocious beasts over. Wouldn't it be more convenient for us to kill them this way? Just as she said that, she suddenly felt that the aura in the air seemed to have changed. Moreover, the ground also started to tremble slightly, as if a large number of ferocious beasts were rushing over here. Chapter 2273. Fengjie's eyes also moved slightly, as he paid attention to the movements around him. Suddenly, he felt a fierce aura pouncing towards him. Fengjie quickly turned around, and at the same time, he leaped into the air with the tip of his foot, jumping onto a tree at the side. Roar! The ferocious beast's roar was accompanied by a powerful pressure. The bloodthirsty aura and ferocious aura caused the air to slightly change. From the tree, she could only see that the beast that pounced out was a golden tattooed leopard. Its entire body was filled with a bloodthirsty and ferocious aura. Furthermore, it was a ferocious beast that had already reached the peak of the 9th rank. The golden tattooed leopard pounced towards one of the devil cultivators at an extremely fast speed. It let out a low roar and slightly opened its mouth to reveal its sharp teeth. All of them were emitting a bloodthirsty and ferocious aura. The devil cultivator quickly dodged, but the golden tattooed leopard quickly pounced again. Behind it, another group of ferocious beasts rushed over. These beasts were not as strong as the golden tattooed leopard, but their entire bodies were filled with the smell of blood, and their ferocious aura was very obvious. The group of ferocious beasts rushed forward and quickly surrounded the 2 cultivators. They revealed their sharp claws and revealed their sharp teeth as they tore at them. The two devil cultivators did not expect to be surrounded by such a group of ferocious beasts, not long after entering this place. They only felt the intense pain of being bitten, causing them to involuntarily raise their heads and cry out. It was also when they raised their heads that the two of them saw Fengjie watching from the tree. The group of ferocious beasts below actually did not attack him, but only attacked the two of them. They anxiously and angrily shouted at him. "What are you still doing up there? Come down and help." Fengjie stood on top of the tree with one hand holding a branch, watching the two cultivators being bitten by the ferocious beasts. She felt around in her sleeves, took out a fruit, and took a bite, saying, "It's so dangerous down there, I'd be an idiot to go down." She ate the fruit leisurely, and looked at the two people whose clothes were torn by the ferocious beasts. Her eyes moved slightly. She has the coercion of an ancient divine beast within her body. As long as she releases a strand of that coercion, the ferocious beasts below would not dare to approach her. Otherwise, why would they only attack those two and not her? It was said that humans knew how to weigh the situation, but they didn't know that beasts also knew how to survive. Perhaps because of the ancient pressure emanating from Fengjie's body, the two demonic cultivators felt the existence of the pressure, and their hearts shook. They looked at Fengjie in disbelief and exclaimed, Why do you have an ancient aura? Who are you?" Hearing this, Fengjie chuckled as he chewed on his fruit. He stared deeply at the two devil cultivators below. With the strength of these two people, as long as she released her pressure, it was impossible for them not to sense it. She dared to do so, because she knew that these two would not be able to return alive. "Let's talk about it when you can survive," she said from the tree as she watched the two people being knocked down. Then, the leopard opened its mouth and bit off their necks. Then it bit towards the dantian of the two demonic cultivators. Blood splashed out, and the sound of bones breaking could be heard. Not long after, the two demonic cultivators died. Their bodies were torn into pieces by the group of ferocious beasts, and scattered on the ground. Chapter 2274. That leopard had retreated after the two demonic cultivators had died, and it let out a low growl as it stared at Fengjie on the tree with its bloodthirsty eyes, filled with fear and hesitation. Fengjie stared at that leopard and scoffed. "What are you staring at me for? Don't tell me you want to fight with me?" She smiled playfully and looked at that leopard below. "If you don't leave, I'm going to use you as a practice partner." As though it understood her words, that leopard let out a low growl and retreated step by step. Following that, it leapt into the weeds and disappeared from Fengjie's line of sight in a blink of an eye. She looked at that herd of ferocious beasts below, and curled her lips in disdain. Not to mention that the meat of these ferocious beasts was too tough, just based on the scene of them tearing apart those two demonic cultivators. She couldn't bear to eat this herd of ferocious beasts. Although there were ancient ferocious beasts here, but based on her current ability, if she were to meet an ancient ferocious beast, she would only be unlucky. Looks like she'd better hunt a few more ferocious beasts, and roast their meat before leaving. She'd wait till her spiritual energy seal was broken before she came back to explore this beast forest. After making up her mind, she threw the core of the fruit down, and with a tap of her foot, she swept past those ferocious beasts below, and headed into the depths of the forest. As the night deepened, the howls of the ferocious beasts in the beast forest started to ring out. Faintly, she could even hear the howls of wolves. And in this forest, Fengjie was roasting meat, and the rich aroma of the meat spread throughout the forest along with the night. She took out a small knife, and cut off a piece of roasted meat to eat. Suddenly, she heard the sound of a bell around her waist, and the surrounding air turned cold. Seeing this, her brows moved slightly, and she swept a glance at her surroundings. She couldn't see anything in the pitch-black surroundings, but the feeling of being stared at was extremely clear. Seeing this, she ate the roasted meat in her hands in a few bites, then put the roasted pig on the rack over the fire into her space. She wiped her mouth and hands, and a voice that contained the aura of profound energy also came out. "If you continue to follow me, I will take all of you in." Her voice was clear, cold, and sharp. Her voice contained the aura of profound energy, as well as the might of an ancient divine beast. Almost at the same time her voice was heard, the bell on her waist that was ringing became silent for a moment before it started ringing again. "You don't believe me?" She curled her lips and took out the accessory on her waist. Holding the small gourd in her hand, she secretly injected her profound energy into her palm, and the small gourd instantly grew bigger in her hand. She opened the mouth of the gourd and threw the gourd in her hand above her head. The gourd emitted a ray of profound energy light, and as the light spread out, the surrounding airflow was also driven, as if it was being absorbed by the gourd. Fengjiu looked at the gourd, a dim light flashing in his eyes. It was also her first time using this. She didn't know if the effects were as good as what her sister had said. Whoosh! That gourd started to spin and sucked in the surrounding air. In an instant, she saw the surrounding leaves rustling, as if something was being sucked into the gourd. Following that, there were waves of sharp and mournful screams and cries of alarm. Those screams were sharp and eerie, bringing along a bone-chilling chill that rang out in the forest, causing her to involuntarily narrow her eyes. It struggled to move forward again. But in the end, after taking 2 steps, it fell to the ground. Perhaps the smell of blood from that ferocious beast had stimulated the other ferocious beasts. The attacks from the ferocious beasts became even fiercer. Even the golden leopard roared and bit one of the cultivators. A cultivator's leg was bitten. Blood gushed out like a fountain, dyeing his clothes red and dripping all over the ground. Chapter 2276. The leopard was clearly shocked and involuntarily took a few steps back. It opened its mouth and stared at Fengjiu warily. It growled as if it was asking, "Why is it you again?" Perhaps because the golden leopard suddenly retreated, the other beasts that were attacking the cultivators also retreated and looked warily at the figure standing on the tree branch. They recognized the green-robed man. They had just met him yesterday. This human had the aura of an ancient divine beast that they were afraid of. It was also because of this that they did not dare to touch him. So why did they meet him again? Due to the sudden retreat of the ferocious beasts, the cultivators finally had a chance to catch their breath. They supported each other and retreated a few steps, vigilantly staring at the ferocious beasts in front of them, while sizing up the azure-robed man who had suddenly appeared. Who was this person? Why did he suddenly appear here? And he was alone. Why would his appearance cause these ferocious beasts to fear him? A series of questions popped up in their minds. However, when they sized up the man in green, they realized that he was only a mystic. Furthermore, he was only a black tortoise god mystic. The combat strength of mystic cultivators was inferior to that of spirit cultivators. But why did this person make these bloodthirsty beasts retreat in fright without saying a word? "Who are you, sir? Why did you save us?" The old man among them endured the pain of his wounds and supported a cultivator whose thigh had been bitten. He looked at the young man standing on the tree branch and asked. Fengjiu leaped lightly from the tree and landed firmly on the ground. She slowly walked forward and glanced at the heavily injured people. She said, "You guys, if I didn't do anything, you would have died without a doubt." Hearing this, the cultivators looked at each other. The old man asked, "If you have something to say, please say it. It's very simple. I'm lacking manpower. I saved you, and you have to listen to my orders in the future and treat me as your master. How about it?" Since the other party was direct, she also directly stated her purpose. Hearing this, the cultivators were slightly startled. They didn't immediately agree. Instead, they hesitated and asked, "What do you want us to do?" "Of course it's to kill." She looked at them and said, "Of course, you can also refuse. However, if you refuse, I won't save you. Do you want to live? The choice is in your hands." The few of them were silent for a moment. They glanced at each other, as if they were communicating with their eyes. In the end, it was the old man who spoke. "Fine, we agree. As long as you save us, our lives are yours. In the future, we will naturally treat you as our leader and listen to your orders." "Very good." Fengjiu's lips curled into a smile. His expression was filled with confidence as he said, "You've made the right choice. Follow me and you'll have meat to eat." Hearing this, their expressions were complicated. No one knew what they were thinking. At this moment, Fengjiu's gaze swept past them and landed on the golden leopard. "They are my people. Take your beasts and leave. Otherwise, I don't mind killing a few for them as food." When the golden leopard heard this, it let out a low howl. It looked deeply at Fengjiu. In the end, it let out a low growl and quickly turned to leave. As it left, the group of beasts didn't stay and left as well. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.